Today we're going to focus on sine graphs that have phase shift either to the right or to the left. All right, today we're going to graph sine functions with phase shift. So we're going to have phase shifts to the right or to the left, which is going to affect how we graph these. So the first part is the same. You will find all four key features. And remember, if this has a leading coefficient, it must be factored out on the outside of the parentheses. So anytime there is a quantity inside the parentheses here, you will have a phase shift. So let's factor the 2 out. And in factoring the 2 out, I will divide this by 2, and I will divide this by 2. It's already being divided by 2, so that 2 is going to join the other one, and we will multiply those together. So what this is really equivalent to is this. It is the sine of 2, parentheses, x minus pi over 4, parentheses, plus 1. And now I can find my key features. My amplitude is the number in front here. It has to exist. It is a 1. Period is 2 pi divided by b, and my b value is factored on the outside of the parentheses. So it is a 2, and that is a pi. Phase shift now is this, and it goes in the opposite direction. So it is going to be right pi over 4, or you can write it as pi over 4. And then the midline is a 1. Now, just like before, you're going to start by creating your scale. You know this is 0. You're always going to use that 0. And you're going to create one period on going out to pi. So we're going to keep this as a pi right here. And just like before, we took pi and divided it by 4. And that represented each of the, or the difference between each of these. So the first one is going to be 1 pi over 4. When I add a pi over 4, I get 2 pi over 4. And 2 pi over 4 is the same as pi over 2. And then I get 3 pi over 4. And then 4 pi over 4, which is just pi. And then I'm going to put my negatives on the other side so I don't forget about that. Okay, now let's find our midline. Midline is at 1. And amplitude is 1, so I will go up 1 to my maximum of 2, and down 1 to my minimum of 0, and that, by the way, is my range. And I know my domain goes forever, so negative infinity to infinity. And now here's where it's different. Before you start on the midline, and we always started at 0 right here, and then we would increase first if it was positive, which it is, decrease if it was not. Points 1, 3, and 5 are on the midline. With a phase shift, we are just shifting where we begin. We're now going to begin right pi over 4. So we're going to find on our scale where pi over 4 is, and where we're going to begin is at that point. So right pi over 4 is right here. That's my new starting point. That is point 1. Now, if this is 1, that's 2, that's 3, which is on the midline. This is 4. This will be point number 5, which if I continue to count by pi over 4, it's going to be 5 pi over 4 right there. And if I go backwards, here was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right here. And again, looking at my point 1, we said because this is positive, I have to increase before I decrease. So this will go up, this one will go down, and it'll curve back around. And following the pattern, it will, I have to redraw that, that was bad. It'll look like this, and that gives me 2 periods of my function with my transformation of pi over 4. Now, if you were to take a look at just this part, it would look like a regular sine function that we would have graphed at 0, but instead we have a new starting point. That's the only difference. And the key idea is make sure you factor out that b value right here and make sure you start with that phase shift by moving to that as your starting point. All right, let's do another one. This also has a phase shift because something's in the parentheses. The x has a leading coefficient, so we have to factor that out. So we will divide this by 4. we're going to divide this by 4. And by the way, this 1/2 pi is the same as writing, this would be pi over 1, pi over 2. So when I divide this by 4, it's already being divided by 2, so that's going to be multiplied together. That's going to make that pi over 8. So we have sine of 4. We have x plus pi over 8 plus 2. Now my amplitude is the number in the front. It is a 1. My period is 2 pi divided by b. My b is a 4. So it's pi over 2. Phase shift, it's a plus, so we're going to go left pi over 8. Or you could do a negative pi over 8. I like the left and right better. And the midline is a 2. So in creating my scale, my period this time is pi over 2. So if I start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, here's my pi over 2. And just like before, I'm going to take and divide this by 4. And dividing by 4 is the same as multiplying by 1/4, and that's going to make that pi over 8. So each tick mark represents pi over 8. This is 1 pi over 8. The next one is 2 pi over 8, which is pi over 4. 3 pi over 8. 4 pi over 8, which reduces to that. And then my negatives. And my midline. My midline is at a positive 2. My amplitude, I'm going up 1 to my maximum of 3, down 1 to my minimum of 1, and 1 to 3 is my range. And now in graphing this, typically I would start on the midline at 0, but this time I have to go left pi over 8. So here's where I began at negative pi over 8. There's my starting point. This is point 1, my new point 1. 2, 3 is on the midline. 4, 5 is on the midline. Going backwards, this one's on the midline. And the last tick mark that I don't have is on the midline. Again, right here, because this is a positive sign, I will increase before I decrease. So that's my maximum. That's my minimum. And following the pattern, make sure you flip this tail around. And likewise here, if you make this go up like that, I'm going to mark it wrong because you cannot cross that line. So be very careful with that. And this again is your new function with the appropriate transformations. We have 2 more, both of which are negatives. So let's start this one right here. You will notice we have a phase shift, and that leading coefficient needs to come out. So we will divide this by 4 and this by 4, which is going to leave us with this. My amplitude is the absolute value of this, so it's going to be a positive 2. Period is 2 pi divided by b, and my b is 4. So this is pi over 2. Phase shift, I'm going left pi over 4, or I could write that as negative pi over 4. And my midline, nothing is added to that. Well, that's a 0. And let's create our scale. We are going to, we have a period of pi over 2. So if I take pi over 2 and I divide that by 4, it's the same as multiplying by 1/4. It is pi over 8. This is 1 pi over 8. 2 pi over 8 is pi over 4. 3 pi over 8. 4 pi over 8 is pi over 2. So you're just counting by pi over 8s. Adding 1 to the top every time and reducing your fraction. And there we have it. But, midline. Let's go ahead and do our midline. That is on 0. Amplitude is 2, so the maximum we're going to go is 2. The minimum we're going to go is negative 2, which is also known as my range. And instead of starting at 0, we are going to start at negative pi over 4 because we have to go left pi over 4. So we are jumping way over here as our starting point. So this is 0.1. 0.3 is here. 0.5 is here. I'm going to continue to do every other one. So I go end to end. At negative pi over 4, I will this time decrease because of the negative before I increase. So I'm going to decrease here, then I'll increase. Decrease, and follow the pattern on both sides. Notice this time I did not add any additional numbers. I just used my existing scale by following the pattern. That's what I would recommend you do, so you don't have to worry about additional tick marks and labels on the bottom. And there's your answer for that one. All right, one final example here that I would highly recommend you watch for at least the first 30 seconds. But it is a negative one as well, so it's good practice. So we have a phase shift because we have something inside the parentheses here. This b value needs to be factored out, meaning we'll divide this by 1/2 and divide this by 1/2. That is going to leave us with this. -2 sine, the 1/2 is coming out. And over here, we have pi divided by 1/2. Okay, we know we can't divide by 1/2, so instead we have to multiply by the reciprocal. So this right here is going to be minus a 2 pi, and then plus 1. And this is where we're gonna get our key information from. Our amplitude is 2. Period is 2 pi divided by b, and my b is 1/2. So this is the same as 2 pi times the reciprocal, which is 4 pi. And those are the hardest parts about this. Doing the math there, people make mistakes. Phase shift, we are going right pi over 2 pi. And the midline is at 1. So when graphing my period, I am going here, 0, here's 4 pi. And when I take 4 pi and divide it by 4, clearly I get pi. So I have 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and then the negatives. And my midline is at 1. My amplitude is 2, so I will go up 2 to my maximum and down 2 to my minimum. So I'm going from -1 to 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, positive 3. And now when I graph this, I have to start with my phase shift, and my phase shift is going right pi over 2. So I'm going to start right here. And from that point, every other one is on the midline. I'm going end to end, so I don't have to add anymore. And again, this is my starting point. This is my new point 1. And because it's negative, I have to decrease before I increase. So I'll decrease here, and then I would increase after that. That flips around. This is an increase, following the pattern the other way. And this right here is my sine function. And what you should notice is this. We had a negative sine function that had some transformations. If I go and look at one cycle of this from 0 to, well, it happens to be 4 pi, but 0 to 4 pi, you guys, this looks exactly like a positive sine function, okay, which it should. But we had a different starting point. We started at 2 pi to give it our negative sine function. But when you have transformations, the functions can look like a positive sine, negative sine, positive cosine, and negative cosine. Now, of course, you don't know what the cosine ones look like, but we will get to that tomorrow. So for now, you can finish the backside of your 4.5 worksheet, and then you can submit it into Schoology. And make sure you do that today, because tomorrow you'll have a full day, big lesson with the cosine. So have a great day. Bye.